Hey, everybody, this is Jason Truding. This is our Brooklyn Bound podcast, and I am excited. We got another show coming up in March, March 6th, going to be in our space. Michael, is it true that the show's at 8 o'clock? I believe the show's at 8 o'clock.
Great, sure. Yes.
You'll be
That
there at
sounds
8.
wonderful. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. We're back. It's gonna be great. We have three sets of music. I'm gonna interview everybody this week, so y'all can check out some more about them. And today I'm here with Michael Love. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How was my intro?
It was great. It was
It was
wonderful.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the most stressful part of this moment. Now we just get to talk. Michael, I was telling you, I pretty much start all of these off the same way. And this first question, like we've known each other for, I don't know, a year and a half, but we get to know each other a little bit better every time
Right.
we play some music together. There's a lot that I don't know about you still. So the question is basically, go back to little Michael. When did you discover your love of dance, music, movement, sound making?
Yeah.
What has your trajectory been? And maybe draw the line to even here in some way. Right? Now we're both in Princeton. So
Yeah.
what's your trajectory been?
Yeah. So I discovered tap dance by watching Savion Glover on Sesame Street, right? I'm a late 80s baby, so maybe when I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember watching Savion with Big Bird, and I was like enthralled. And so my mom, super thankful to her. Both my parents were like always super supportive of like me being in the arts. And so my mom sort of looked through the yellow pages and found like a dance studio, and put me in tap classes, and it just stuck.
Where
And
was this?
so
Where?
I grew up in Germantown, Maryland, which is like a far suburb of Washington, D.C. So I grew up in the D.C. area. Um, and so, I did that all the way up through middle school. Also, I don't know if you know this, but I also played alto, tenor, and baritone saxophones
This has
and
never come up.
clarinet.
Never come up.
So I have like music and, maybe until I was like a sophomore in high school, but I did it like semi-seriously. I was also in the marching band in high school. But I was always tap dancing and, also was a theater kid, like did musicals and drama club and that sort of thing. Um, Never really got into sports, but it was always dance, and then the arts was always a part of like what I was interested in.
Mm.
And then in high school, I there was this youth tap ensemble that was based in DC called Tappers with Attitude. And
Oh, maybe.
so
This
yeah,
is
and
the 90s. Now we're in the 90s.
this is early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Oh,
Um,
yeah. Of course.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So very early, like, I think I joined the group in like '01, '02 or something. So I auditioned for this pre-professional company, and it was actually a pretty formative experience. So I did that for 4 or 5 years, like all the way until I left high school. Um, and it was pretty serious. We rehearsed 2 to 3 times a week. We would like commission new works from pretty renowned tap choreographers who would like fly in and be with us for a weekend, and we would like learn pieces and put them up. We had our own yearly concert that we would present at like dance venues in DC. So like we would do a full evening length concert at like dance place, and we would often perform. Like we would have 2 or 3 performances a month. So we would like rehearse and present work at like the Smithsonian and the Kennedy Center, and like so we were doing this at a pretty high level,
Oh,
and that was like my first sort of experience of like um, what it meant to be like I wasn't getting paid because I was a
yeah.
kid, but it was
Yeah.
like you know professional for all intents and purposes.
So this was this is every time we talk about this, I say the caveat. I'm just gonna say it again. I'm gonna ask
Yeah,
some stupid
yeah,
questions
please,
here.
please.
But like this was an ensemble.
Yeah, so it
When
was a
you're taking
group of kids. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, in like a tap class, like when you're taking tap class, like when you discovered it, is that a solo venture or is that I mean, you're in
Yeah.
class, but
So this is the trucks are going by. I live right next to the major road. But so this is the very interesting thing is that when I first started as a 5 year old, I was taking I think there was maybe my mom found this like tap ballet jazz like,
mm,
combo class.
definitely, yeah.
And she would just like bring me in. I think the dance teacher and my mom were like, we'll just bring him in for like the tap section.
Mm.
So I would just like hang out for 30, 40 minutes. And then eventually there were tap classes, full tap classes I would take. Um, And yeah, so now it's interesting as a because I'm primarily a solo artist and I'll collaborate with other folks. And I'm actually really for the first time at this point in my life working, setting work on a group, an ensemble of dancers. Like that's what my most recent work is doing. And so that's like an interesting experience to return to this idea of dancing as an ensemble.
Mm.
And so at that point, like late 90s, early 2000s, there were sort of like several youth tap ensembles in the country. So there was Tappers with Attitude in DC. There's the North Carolina Youth Tap Ensemble, which is a really big program in, not in Charlotte, in Chapel Hill.
Mm.
Um, and there were some other like really big groups. And so we would all travel to like this conference that happened every summer in Chicago. Um,
Oh,
so there's this idea of like learning this form that's usually seen as this like solo thing, but like thinking about how to do it as a group of people, right?
oh, wow.
Which is a pretty rare experience. I
Yeah.
learned as an adult after I left. It's like there aren't tap companies. I mean, there's folks, you know, um, folks like Michelle Dorrance and Ida Lee Cassell and Michaela Lerman and Dormisha Sumbry Edwards are like folks who present right now regularly at the Joyce, and they'll have ensembles, but what they do is a lot of pickup. So they just know all the folks and they'll put projects together and then like
Mm.
they'll dance and they'll present full works. And I like Leo Sandoval also has a company of folks, but like the tap company is sort of like a loose, it's not,
Like a
as much of
ballet
a
company
concept.
is
Right.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
or a
Like there
contemporary.
is no like full-time salaried full benefits
Right.
tap company in the same way there's like the New York City Ballet, like the Joffrey Ballet. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, interesting. Interesting. Okay. I got us
Yeah.
on a tangent, but that's so
Yeah.
then you're in high school, you're in Tappers with Attitude,
Yes.
Tappers
That's
with
it. Yes.
Attitude.
Yes,
You
exactly.
play in DC, which that sounds amazing. I have to say,
Yeah.
like I grew up in the suburbs of LA and I traveled with the jazz band. We played places, but
Yeah.
we didn't put up shows in LA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
even just that language of like we were putting up shows in
Yeah.
DC feels like that's pretty
And we
amazing.
were we would be reviewed. I'm forgetting the name of the big dance critic at the time would like come and
Yeah.
review our show, and it would
Wow.
be in the post.
Wow.
Um, so it was
Wow.
a big
Uh,
deal, and like I
mm,
just like looking back, it was like I feel lucky to have had that experience.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the folks who came out of earlier iterations of the company were like Bakari Wilder, who's a mentor of mine, who went on to take over Savion's role in Bring the Noise, Bring the Funk when it went on tour. Um, the R&B singer Maya was famously like a alum of Tappers with Attitude Youth Ensemble.
Cool.
So there are some folks who have gone on to like much bigger careers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was all through high school. Then I graduated, and then I went to Emerson College for undergrad in Boston. Um, actually like started a company there that's still there. The
Oh,
students
killer.
there are continuing that. Um, and also I was thinking a lot about like hip hop choreography, so I was doing that in that company, thinking about those two forms together.
With tap or yeah.
Yeah, tap and hip hop, you
Oh,
know. Um, and then I left Boston when I graduated and lived in New York and was like a gigging dancer for a while.
mm.
Um, and then that brought me to Austin, Texas, randomly enough.
Can we pause? Can you even just tell me that's like
Yeah.
so tell me what's a gigging dancer in New York? What's
So I moved to New York right after I graduated, and it was just kind of a mess. And by that I mean I was broke. I was living um, off of the Kings Highway stop on the Q, so like very far out in Brooklyn.
yeah.
I remember just being so naive, and like I was working with this real estate agent, which is you should never do that if you're just trying to like get to New York. I should have just subletted the place.
Uh,
But this real estate person was like, yeah, like this is like Midwood is close to the city. Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
should
yeah,
take like
right,
20
right,
minutes on the train. And so I
right.
believed him, and we ended up in this place that was like a friend and I from undergrad were like, it took us an hour just to get to like 14th Street or
Far out.
whatever, an
Yeah.
hour plus.
Mm.
Um, but whatever, I did it. I did the thing. I struggled and was like broke in New York and just like auditioning, and I would do some stuff here and there. And I was dancing with Andrew Nemmer, who was a dancer who had a company, right? Again, this idea, but he did have a group of folks that he would like rehearse with, and like he would do stuff. Like we did a thing at Webster Hall, we did a thing at Symphony Space, um, and I was making a little bit of money off of that. But then I was, like working retail, like doing that whole thing, and then I got like some theme park work, so I did that for a while. and I moved home for a bit, like with my parents, and was like leaving out on contracts. So it was like this
Yeah,
constantly moving around and just like, following the money, and
yeah.
like some pretty cool stuff would happen.
And those gigs would be like I can imagine, like when you say the theme park work. I mean, I know that from musician too. You'd be like, you get it,
Yeah.
get a gig at some restaurant or at some whatever. You
Yeah.
get food and watch the thing, or you can have the show at the whatever. Is
Yeah.
that what it was? And so, like, would this
Yeah.
be solo vibe, or it would be?
No, so these would be like shows. Like,
Hmm,
so one contract I did actually was so the Country Stars Big and Rich helped
nice.
open this casino in Deadwood, South Dakota. And so I was one of like maybe 15 people that were hired to do this like Christmas show. So we
Right.
would live in Deadwood, South Dakota for like, a month or two and like rehearse this thing for like 2 weeks or whatever, and
Gosh.
then like do the show all week, like through the Christmas season.
Yeah.
So, like cool, like, it's like cool. I mean, like in this like snowy
Yeah.
Black Mountains, it was like very beautiful.
Yeah.
But sort of like random in that, like here I am, I would like fly into Rapid, South Dakota and like be
Oh
in
my
this
gosh.
like pretty remote place, but like
Yeah.
be doing like this resort show.
Yeah.
So that was,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
hanging out at a casino
But
for
like
like a
playing
month.
every night, it was like, or
Yeah, yeah. It was
multiple.
like maybe like Wednesday through Sunday or something like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
would have like Mondays off or whatever. Um,
It's funny. My partner Beth made used to do the Rockettes thing. She would play viola
yeah,
Rockettes thing, and but like that was like it was also a Christmas thing.
yes,
But since it's New York, there's just more people I imagine to go
yeah,
see it this house. So
yeah,
you're starting at some point. You're doing shows at like 9 in the morning. I mean, it just goes like 9, 11,
yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
Like
that is a little like Radio City is a bit of a machine. Like it
yeah,
wasn't that intense, but it was,
yeah,
it was like a show a night, I think.
yeah.
I think
But
we
that's
did
like
maybe two on Saturdays. So it felt like,
a lot,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
Broadway show vibe.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, that kind of schedule,
yeah,
if you will. But yeah, so I was doing sort of like projects like that. And then I eventually ended up getting this sort of like company contract with this company based in Austin. So I moved to Austin to like sort of take that, and then that sort of fell apart just because I learned that the director actually turned out to be like crazy. Um,
oh,
so whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm in Austin, like it's a cool city. And then also at that time, I was thinking about I was maybe like 26, 27, and I was sort of having the thoughts of like, all right, like what's the long-term plan here? Like how can I maybe have like more of a stable paycheck if that's possible? Um, and I had always known that I would be interested in getting an MFA at some point. So I just happened to be in the circle of people that because Austin's a pretty small town, and like when you are a dancer choreographer, like theater person, you just like meet all the folks. And so
yeah, yeah.
I met one of the professors in that program, and she was sort of like, I would love to read an application from you. So I was
Mm.
like, all right, like that sounds like an invitation. So I applied and I ended up
Oh,
getting
yeah.
in to, funnily enough, Stacy Wolf and Jill Dolan at Princeton
Mm.
started the graduate program at UT that I
Oh,
ended up being like graduating from. So
oh, no
there's like that
way.
weird, yeah, that weird sort of like small world thing happened.
Yeah, yeah,
But they had left UT by the time I was thinking about going
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Cool.
so that was like my last. I was in Austin for 7, 8-ish years, and my last 3 years were like in that. Well, my last 4 years were there. Three of
Yeah,
those last 4 years were in that program, and then the pandemic happened.
right.
And
And
then
the MFA is
it's in
in
performance studies. So the
yeah,
program is called Performance as Public Practice.
yeah,
You know, there's a lot of programs at UT that have like those fancy names, but that's
yeah,
what it
yeah.
is. And so it's very like open-ended. So everyone coming into the program sort of has their own project.
Mm,
Um, and there are different tracks. So a lot of the people coming into that program did like the PhD, right? And they would sort of like be there and do their research for several years.
mm.
And the MFA was like a 3 year, hard 3 years, get out. So that was like attractive to me to sort of like get the degree, have, be focused on research for a while and then leave.
Yeah.
Um,
And you made work, if I remember right.
yeah,
I mean, you were making work while you were there.
yeah.
Some of
I
the
made
cool
a
stuff I've
I
seen.
made a ton of work
Yeah.
because I had been living in Austin by that point for like 4 or 5 years. So I like knew the town well enough that I was like producing stuff. And so like I said, I originally moved to Austin to start to be a part of this company, and then I decided to leave. And then I was just like making my own work. And so I was like self-producing some. I was presenting in Fusebox Festival, which is a really amazing festival that happens there. They bring in a lot of international artists. It's like a really cool space. Specifically a performance space festival. So there's a lot of that was a great venue for me to like present work that I had been working on for a while. There's also an organization in Austin called Arcos Dance, and they were sort of like instrumental. They gave me this mini grant in like 2016. That was like $500, but it allowed for me to like rent a space and like self-produce like
Yeah.
a show. And then they've been super supportive since then,
Very cool.
with like funding and just like consultation and all kinds of things. So yeah, so I had my community in Austin, and I was like building works, and then like once I became a grad student, I was like thinking about theory and practice and all those things together and like making more work. And then the pandemic happened, but I was still actually doing stuff virtually. And at that point, I ended up, because I would lived on the second floor, like I couldn't, like at one point, because I was always, yeah, exactly. I was like teaching in studios, and so there was a studio that I had the key to, so I could just like go in and like use the studio whenever I wanted.
Oh,
But
yeah,
then like once the pandemic happened, I had all this anxiety about like, and
yeah.
like there was that period of time when like we didn't leave our houses, so like it wasn't as available to me at that point. So I had to go to my downstairs neighbor and like leave a note that was like, believe it or not, I'm actually like a tap dancer. So like I have to teach class at these 2 hours during the week. And he was like super like, I get it. Like we're
Oh,
all in this crazy experience.
oh, man, that's great.
Yeah, so he
That
was
could have gone either
forgiving.
way. That could have
Yeah,
gone either
yeah,
way. Yeah.
exactly. But I was sort of like, I think after like a month or two, I was like, I think I need to like figure something out that's like less, you know,
Yeah.
because also it was an older building, and I just had this nightmare of like me crashing, like crashing through like into my, yeah. So I
Amazing.
ended up renting the front office of this warehouse. Like this, someone, I just went on Craigslist and was like looking for space, and someone was like, "Yeah, for $400, like you can just have the office of this warehouse where I store like the seltzer water that I sell."
Oh my gosh.
And so it just was this crazy like random situation. And then I set up a studio for myself. I build my own, like I bought like 4x8 planks of plywood, like built a dance floor, and was doing this like Zoom performance thing for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and then like somewhere in that point, I was applying and like applied to the Fellowship of Princeton and like ended up getting it. So that's like why I left Austin. But yeah, and so now I'm here at
You
Princeton, which is how we
masterfully
met.
got us here. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
and
yeah.
you were in your second year of the Princeton Arts Fellows program.
This is my second year. Yes.
And so last year, I'm trying to bring back, like last year was still pandemic-y, but not 100%. It was like some
Yeah,
pandemic-y or
yeah,
whatever. We definitely got in a room together last year, I think, and
yeah,
maybe played some music and tried some.
yeah,
It was cool being on my side of it. So I did that fellowship program the first year. So people are always, it's like, oh, this super cool fellow's coming out. You got to meet this person. But like when you were coming, everybody was just like, you got to meet Michael. You got to meet Michael. You
yeah,
got
yeah,
both because you're just awesome and because there's so much overlap in what
yeah,
we're doing as percussionists and tap. And I remember Dan, who we were just playing with today, and we'll talk about, was just like, oh man, I can't wait to see what's gonna happen when you get in a
yeah,
room with Michael. Man, I really appreciate just how like you came so open to. I think we just jammed one day. It was the first time we
yeah,
did anything. It was like, let's set up a drum set. And I'm sure I've said this, Michael, but what I remember is like we maybe played for 15 minutes, and I was like, man, that was really fun. And as you know, my eyes were closed, and I'm just listening. And then I opened my eyes and like, playing for 15 minutes as a drummer is like, I'm a little tired. You were like working so much harder than I was. It's like, oh my God, right. Like you're a musician, but you're a dancer.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
bringing it for 15
yeah.
minutes.
But I remember that day, and I remember like there's this feeling of like excitement to like play with you, and it's like I think I maybe was just like there was
Go.
so much energy, and I was just like
Yeah,
into it, and so like
yeah.
that's why, it's also because I was like dancing, but it's like that's like where the sweatiness came
Oh,
from. But
I
but
love
yeah,
that
yeah,
then,
yeah,
man. I love that.
yeah,
But I have to say, man, any time we've been around dancers, it's just so great to remember how like just the physicalness of it is amazing. And the
yeah,
like I kind of sweat after a show, but I'm using my body in a different way. We're both using
yeah,
our
yeah,
bodies, but it's very
yeah,
different.
yeah,
Man, I want to get into just a little bit what we're doing together and what we're going to do on Brooklyn Bound, but can you frame just in some way what your work has been about outside of these kind of collaborations, like what you've been thinking about or what you've been making?
yeah. So I think a lot about genre and like the history of genres, and how the past has informed where we are at the present and how we can use the past to think about where we could be in the future. Um, and so the current project, like I grew up on a lot of funk. Like my parents had this like amazing LP collection, and I was always listening to like Earth, Wind, and Fire, and like just like Stevie Wonder was a big thing or artist that my parents played a lot in my house, and there was a lot of like Janet and Michael and like Prince. Um, so I'm always thinking about that music, but right now I'm thinking specifically about like the history of like house music,
Mm.
um, and like how if that does fit with tap dance and like how it does and doesn't. And just like house music also is this way that like folks are thinking about Afrofuturism, um, and like what that means. So that's one thing I'm thinking about right now with my work. So yeah.
Have you been dancing to house tracks as a thing?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I've been collaborating actually with two folks. One, Ariel Renee Jackson, who's like a video artist, and then DeForest Brown Jr., who's a he works more in techno, but like also understands house and like electronic music broadly. So
Mm.
he's like a composer, producer, and we've been working together. And we've been having a similar experience of like it's so cool to like because I have such a respect and like reverence for musicians, and so it's I think it's a mutual thing of like wow, like it's one thing to like watch dance, but then to like work together, right, to like make the music happen in real time with the musician is like such a
Mm.
wild experience. But yeah.
So you've been doing a similar thing where
Yeah, like we'll jam, and so he'll
he's
just
doing his
bring out
thing.
like his electronic setup and like
Yeah.
make stuff happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I'm so excited to see
yeah,
that
yeah,
whenever
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
Like, I'm excited for that.
yeah,
Man, just to hear you talk about any kind of EDM stuff, like there's so many, when you talk about genre, there's so many subgenres.
yeah,
Um, it's pretty amazing actually. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, you
yeah.
do the
And I
house
feel like
thing.
I'm not an expert, so it's just like
Yeah.
I love listening just him because he just like, I mean, he wrote a book, and it's like very
Mm,
thick. I don't have it right now on
mm,
my desk, but I have a copy. But he just has such a deep knowledge of like this is his book
mm.
that he wrote. So it's like a 500-page history of like
Wow.
techno in terms of like coming out of a Detroit, Chicago context.
Yeah. And did we
But yeah,
talk about this? Oh man, and is it Chris Mills? Is Chris Mills the name? Were we
Jeff
Jeff Mills?
Mills,
Yeah, thank you.
right?
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
yeah,
I next time if I ever see him, I'm gonna be so embarrassed. We met him. I think I've told you this. I knew so little about the Detroit scene, like the electronic music scene.
yeah, yeah.
And we were on a festival together in the Netherlands and we played some together. And he had
Wow. Yeah.
is it the Bells? Is like I think is it the Bells? There's something that like, man, I mean, like when he played this song, it was like an audience of 2000 just went crazy. It was like the most popular thing. And he had done like
Yeah,
some work and arrangements with orchestra of some of his most
yeah,
famous kind of
yeah,
techno pieces. And we got to play and it was awesome. But it was
yeah,
just amazing how there are certain people, if I say that name to, it's like they go deep. And
yeah,
then how little I know about, I mean, I can
yeah.
say X
Same.
Twin, you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I know so little about the scene. Man, that's exciting. I would love
yeah,
to see your work together.
yeah, yeah.
DeForest Brown Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. Well, cool, man. I think, I mean, I'm sure there's too much more to talk about with if we're just talking about what the work you're doing, but at Brooklyn Bound, we're kind of using it in a couple ways, kind of the way Brooklyn Bound was meant to be used, kind of trying some things out. And we're also gonna be trying them out later in March, in June. And one of the pieces is something for So and You that we've been working on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we just that piece takes up a lot of space, so we're gonna do like a
Mm-hmm.
little part of that.
Yes.
But so then we decided to throw on this other idea, which has been really fun. We were just rehearsing today.
Yeah.
This music that me and Dan Truman and Adam Swinski have been doing. So I guess with either of those things, maybe with the So project for you, like I'm curious, and I wonder if anybody listening would be curious, right? Like, I mean, I'm very conscious that any dancer thinks about form and music. Like there are similarities to working with any dancer.
Hmm.
There are just so many times that we stop and I'm like, I kind of say the stupid thing, which is just like, oh man, Michael, this is amazing. You are a musician and a dancer. Like both of these things are so intertwined. And I can feel different sounds happening when your body is engaged in different ways. I can feel intensity, but usually I'm hearing those things because
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm listening more than I'm watching, So my experience has been just kind of thrilling, finding ways to put these two things together. And also maybe as a jumping off point, so often we're working in um, time signatures and meters that are not square or something,
Right.
or
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
whatever. Whatever genre we're working in is a
Hmm.
more amorphous space. I feel like it's
Hmm.
harder to
Hmm.
define those
Hmm.
genre things. So we're kind of throwing these long, weird cycles at you, and inviting you in to kind of play with them in a more intuitive way. But like, I imagine
Right.
it's got to be very different for you. So what's your process been like?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I should say it's so amazing just to be in the room with y'all. Like, I think there's just this a sense for me of like, oh, I hope, like we were talking about this earlier today, like I hope I'm like hanging enough that they like that it like makes sense, because I feel like I'm trying to keep up in a certain way, and that's like fun for me.
Mm,
So there's that part of it, but then also I think, and we've talked about this before, I think there's this idea of like this project is exciting because it's forced me to sort of like let go of my training. Like a lot of my training is sort of like you need to know like where the one is at all times. Like you need to be able to like um, count your way through at all times. Like you need to make sure that you know, and then also that you're demonstrating to everyone around you that you know. Um, and I think a lot of there's like untraditional or unsquare time signatures. There's like switching. There's like this really interesting thing happening in the moment, and so it's like made me just figure out how to sit and how to listen and respond. Like it's been a really great exercise in that way for
mm,
me, and it's been so like it's allowed me to expand my own sort of like approach um, to thinking about dancing with live musicians. Um, so yeah, I've just been doing like earlier today when we were just like jamming together. I was trying to just force myself to not be searching for the one and to just respond,
mm,
and
mm,
to think about how to make interesting choices and to make sure that I was like listening.
mm,
um, so I think that's what I've been thinking about, like it's an opportunity for me to sort of like let go of some of the rules in
mm.
certain ways, and make sure that I'm like
Yeah,
responding.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, I like it. I remember. So these two projects, I guess, in some ways are different, but
Hmm.
there's plenty of overlap, I guess, in terms of
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
rhythmic ideas, I guess. But the project so we're doing together that you and so are doing, I'm in the so percussion, so I'm doing it with you as well.
Does it
Uh,
have a name? Do we have a name for it yet? Is there a
I
name
know
or a title?
that's really a great point, actually. Yeah, that's a great point. I'm gonna look to you for help there.
Okay, okay, great.
Because this original music came from this it was titled, like, I don't know if it's titled anything, but we called it a genome project because it came from
right,
a weird
right,
gig we got, kind of setting a strand of a DNA sequence, or the genome sequence.
right, right,
Um,
right.
and so it's these string of, anybody who knows, so like it's these string of letters, we've turned these letters into different rhythms, and it's all very like structural and cyclical and like yeah, like defined. And I mean, we work with it in a slippery way, I think, but it's not intuitive.
Right,
It's very structured or whatever.
right.
And I am very interested as a musician of both, like, where does structure and kind of form come in, and where does kind of intuition and improvisation take you, and how can you push those things together? Um, and I remember showing you these things at first, and like, we all have to, I know for myself too, you have to work through these things in a certain way, but I'm just kind of like, just go, man. And you're like, well, but wait a minute, there's like these sequences, like, shouldn't I know something about
Right,
what's happening? It's like,
right,
no, man, it's gonna be great.
right, right,
Because like, and I remember coming to this idea, right? Because I think if we count out the sequence, it's like 3, 5, and 3. It's like an 11 beat sequence or something. Um,
Hmm.
and I remember working with you and thinking about different ways that it could work and not work. And for whatever reason, when we settled on the idea in an abstract way that you could think in 3 and that we would kind of find each other every once in a while.
Yeah.
But it felt like, so for you in your language, in a tap language, is it right that thinking in 3 and 4 are more natural spaces to think? I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same,
I think,
you
well,
know.
I think it's just there's time signatures that we're like more used to. Like of course like 4/4 is sort of like the one that I understand many people understand the most, right? And then like waltz. And, you know, tap dance is like a sibling of jazz music. So um there is a sense of like talking about time signatures and meters and setting structures, and like maybe thinking about a chorus and like returning to a chorus and thinking about solos. And so like that's like typical of like the language that folks use in tap dance. But yeah, like 4/3. Um, I'm thinking of what's that Brubeck album where there's
Yeah,
like the song in 5 and the song in 7,
yeah,
like the unsquare
yeah,
dance. Like I think like at some point my teachers would like put that on and be like, let's try 7. And like as kids we were like, ah. So but then like there's like those moments where you like train for those like, you know, those
mm,
unsquare dance
yeah.
time signatures.
I like
But
that.
like 4 is like a you know, like 3/4 4/4. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like there's common time signatures, but then like to be, but like I think what's happening in this piece that we're doing is it's so complex,
Mm,
and it's like it's almost like I can't. I found that if I try to count it, it's like easier for me to lose myself
yeah, yeah.
or to get lost, and it's almost like I just have to. I think now we're at a place with it where we understand like the sort of like narrative sequence more.
Hmm.
And I think that's what I'm thinking of more than like the counts. And
Yeah.
it really is becoming like finding more so the pulse of it.
Hmm.
And once like we can establish a pulse with each other, then it's like that's what I'm following more
Yeah, yeah.
than the 3/5/3. Because I think I do remember in the beginning we were trying to think about like how do we count this?
Yeah.
Um, and then I quickly learned like okay, but it's maybe not useful as much.
Letting it go feels good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's right. Well, the class we're teaching this semester is this rhythm class with Olivia. I think I've told you about it. And we're
Hmm.
trying to define some kind of language to talk about rhythm a little bit outside of genre or whatever. So, which is
Yeah.
tricky, so like, how do you talk about time signature versus cycles versus whatever? Like, how do you, being on the one, like the downbeat, like it's really interesting not having a language for it and trying to develop a language for it.
Right,
But we've really been discovering listening to other things, or like, when some aspect of music is really complex and syncopated, some other aspect being more simple and driving really makes a lot of sense. And I feel like
hmm.
we've discovered that together so many times, where
Yeah.
when we're laying something down that has more space, there's space for you to kind of flourish. And then when
Hmm.
you get really going, having you lay down the pulse has been really nice.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to kind of share those energies.
Yeah.
Um, and I have to say, just it's also been the part that we're not going to play on Brooklyn Bound, I guess. I think on Brooklyn Bound, we're going to play a kind of like stuff that doesn't need as much space, like some
Right.
energetic stuff. But it was really interesting. We've started to mess around with this idea of you going to different dance platforms to almost conduct us or to turn us on and off musically, and play the four of us as an instrument almost, like
Right.
have.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it was really cool. Just another, I guess, just another shout out, man. Like, it's really cool to see, to work with a dancer that has such musically attuned ears. And that's not to say that I haven't worked with other dancers that, any
Right.
other
I'm sure.
dancer listening going, but you know what I mean? Like, that is just so tapped into what
It's gonna happen. So yeah, just like yeah. No, but yeah, I totally get
you
what
know
you're
what I
saying.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was really cool. And I don't know if you've ever done anything like that before, where um, but it felt like a really natural
Oh.
way to work.
Yeah. Not. I mean, I've worked with musicians before. Not this. Like this feels like experimental. I
Mm,
guess I should say. You know, because before it's been like, okay, we're gonna play this standard, and you're gonna
yeah.
do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and then we, you know, that's usually how it happens.
Yeah.
So this feels like much more freeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's more space for like me to play and
Yeah.
for us to play like off of each other and with each other in that way.
Well, I'm psyched for both of these things on March 6th, but then I think they're both later in the month. We're going to be doing them in Princeton.
Yeah,
Get video of this project, I think, on some level. So
yeah,
those of you who can't be in Princeton, there'll be a way to check this out.
yeah.
And Michael, as we kind of wrap up, I've had a kind of two questions that I ask of everybody. Tidying myself up. So I wonder for you, I mean, you alluded to this a little bit, I guess, just in terms of like physically what the pandemic did for you, right? There was a certain way that you were used to working, and then that kind of changed.
Right.
But like basically we started, I think I was telling you, started doing these Zoom interviews during the pandemic. So it was kind of like, I would ask everybody on some level of like, how has this changed your artistic practice? Like, has it been,
Mm,
being isolated? Like, I know for me, I realized like I didn't write a piece of music. Kind of this piece of music that we're looking at was maybe the first piece of music that I wrote since the
mm,
pandemic. Cause like
mm,
I was working on a lot of my own music in different ways,
mm.
but I didn't write anything new just because I really need to be in the room with other people to make stuff,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So like, the different points in the pandemic that maybe I thought we dealt changed our practice, and then I feel like every month of the pandemic, then there was something else to add on to that. There was
yeah,
like, how did the kind of reckoning in a way where folks in our community were talking more about the George Floyd
right,
moment and looking at
right.
ourselves and looking at our community and saying, why have I only worked with people who look like me? Or why are
Sure,
those
sure,
the only
sure.
people who are on stage? Or my kids, I have two girls, like why, it becomes really evident how patriarchal our scene is, all those things, like, so
Yeah, yeah,
dealing
yeah,
with that. And then all of a sudden there was the election and like there was just any number of things to talk about, and I think we
yeah.
could still keep adding those if we want to keep going through the timeline. But for you, either in a specific way or in a more broad way, these last few years, like, have you rethought about your practice in any way, or has it been kind of a not doubling down, but a kind of like, I think some folks have found comfort in their practice and saying like, no, wait
Yeah,
a minute, I need to see this through. Or
yeah.
what's these years been like for you?
I would say, I mean, and this is probably the experience of a lot of folks in many ways. Um, I like wasn't alone personally in that like my partner and I were together, so I'm like grateful that that's how things were. But like I was lonely in terms of like art making, just because like I could not share space with people easily. Um, and so I would say that I've been trying to do more collaboration just in general. Like this project that I'm working on is like this project that I'm leading, apart from what we're doing together, right? Well, one, this is a collaboration in like a really exciting way, and then two, like I think for the first time, like I figured out with Princeton money how to like work with a group of tap dancers again. So that's been like really exciting to think about that, and I think a lot of my peers are talking about like what does it mean to collaborate as tap dancers? Like we're having those conversations at a much like I think we're just like hungry to like get in the room with each other, and so I think that's probably what I'm doing more of these days, like just getting in the room with other people um, and for on different projects,
Mm,
and sort of just enjoying what it means to be like working on ideas together.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I feel that a lot. It's funny. I didn't realize that I hadn't written music in 3 years. Um, and then to realize like, oh, being with other people to make art it's a really important
Yeah.
part for
Yes.
many people's
Yes.
practice, but for your
Yeah.
practice, it feels like a
Yeah.
similarity there.
Yeah.
um yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm glad we connected at this time.
Yeah. So am
I
I. Yeah.
think, yeah, we're pretty energetic about
Yeah.
collaborating as well.
Likewise. Likewise. Likewise.
All right, last question. So I'll say for So, and
Mhm.
maybe you don't know this, like, you don't know that much about So. We've got to hang a little bit, but So, when we tour around, I feel like when we're in a van together or whatever, we definitely talk about we talk about politics too much. We talk whatever. There's the heavy side of the
Sure.
discussion,
Sure. Sure.
but
Sure.
there's also the just like, by the time you've been on the road a little long, you're starting to talk about the stories of what happened on stage, the good, but oftentimes we're talking about the bad, actually, like,
Right. Right.
like
Right.
And these silly things for us, you know, where it's like one of the first gigs Eric played with us, like we played all these flower pots and he like knocked this flower pot off the stage. And we were actually like 8 feet up on the stage. So it just tumbled and smashed. And, you know, these like kind of like silly war stories, but also the times that things went great, whatever, the kind of
Right. Right.
performance stories, you know, that become your kind of bond, you know, as you
Right.
do this. So what do you have any wonderful or funny or silly or terrible performance story to share? I
I
used to ask the
mean,
question as pre-pandemic, but now we're back to performing. So, you know,
yeah.
so
I like
what's the equivalent
I
for you?
feel
Like
like
your shoe comes untied and you like, I
yeah,
don't
well I mean
know.
I've like literally fallen on stage a lot. Like I think there's always an element of and I think as I've gotten older I've like learned how to just like roll with the
Yeah,
punches.
sure.
And
Yeah.
but okay, so I guess one time I was dancing and in this like theme park show I was doing, and then like I and you know, it was like the kind of thing where we were doing it like 4 times a day. So like at a certain point in the summer, you just become delirious. And
Yeah.
you're maybe like popping like 4 Advil a day. I don't know, it just like starts to get crazy. Um, and so I remember falling, but being so just like on autopilot that it took me a while to realize that I had fallen, and just being on the floor for like a long time and being like, oh my God, I'm not standing straight up anymore. And then
Oh
having to
my
like roll around to get, and so like, I don't know. I've had stories like that. Like I just was in at the University of Maryland doing this like presentation of my work, and the floor was like they would bring a tap floor out for like my part of the show, and so they would set it up, but like there were cracks in the boards or
God.
whatever, and so you know I was like tripping over that and like laughing to myself like this is it just you just have to like learn
Yeah.
how to like laugh at yourself, I guess, like that's
Do
the
you have
yeah.
like when I think of these experiences, I think of like, you know, sometimes we play in bigger concert venues and that's really fun. I
Right,
used to always want to play in the bigger place. And
right,
then you realize like actually playing in the small, like Brooklyn, like playing with just like people right
right,
on or whatever.
right.
Like, have you had that? Does that happen for tap? Like where people,
Yeah, well, I just did a thing. I performed at this launch party of this journal called Untapped, which like it
there you
just
go.
happened that it worked out in that way. But it was in this space downtown. Where was that? I forget where it was. Maybe Soho? Whatever. It was like it was tiny space. There's actually a video of it on my Instagram, but it was like
Oh, perfect.
80 people like crammed into a corner, and I had like my little 3x4 board. And at first I was like, that's a lot of people in this. But then like as it was happening, I was like, oh, like this is cool. Like, and
Yeah.
there was a mirror I was like interacting with, so it was just like a cool
Oh,
moment.
cool. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I like sort of like the intimate venue. I think that does something, and like it's easier to like feel energy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've really coming back, maybe just to connect. I've really come back to that coming out of the pandemic. I feel more and
yeah,
more those were things that felt terrible for a while, or whatever.
yeah,
It didn't happen. I mean, none of it happened, but the kind of intimate space. Well, I'm glad you dig that because Brooklyn Bound is a smaller, it's a
yeah, yeah.
little,
So I'm excited. I'm excited to
yeah,
like feel the energy in the room because yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, we are excited too. It is March 6th
Yes.
at 8 o'clock. Don't forget that. Um, it's great. I'm going to be interviewing both of these next groups as well. But Paul Pinto is an awesome singer. He's in a group called Thing and Why, and he's gonna be doing a solo set, which is pretty great. And
Nice.
we have had some dance in the past, and we're gonna have some
Yeah.
more. It's been cool. It's not a dance space by any
Yeah.
stretch.
Yeah.
But Brian Ellis, who is a SOCI alum, our festival alum, will be there. And Michael, right before we got on, I was looking. Yes, the Brooklyn Motion Capture Dance Ensemble.
Yes.
He did all this awesome stuff where it's like how you move changes the sound. You're kind of
Nice.
like yeah, motion capture. There's these like kind of laser sensor vibes. I'm speaking
Oh,
with
wow.
understand.
Nice.
Yeah, but like, you know, video capture, I guess, and then you change the sound. It's very, very cool. So they're gonna be doing a set that night as well. I think we'll have a good time.
Yeah.
Appreciate you taking this moment to chat, man.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. All right, I will see you soon.
All right.
All
Talk to
right,
you later. All
see
right.
everybody later. Bye.
Bye.